Okay, so this is Blender and welcome to 3D. And I'd like to start off by introducing Blender, showing you some of the interface areas, and then break down some of the basic tools, and then from there we can continue on building on the information that we have. So when you open Blender for the first time, you get this splash screen over here, which gives you some contents that you can work with, basically scenes and settings that you can be able to play around with. If you have opened Blender before and started a project, then you will be able to open your projects just like the way you do it in Adobe Premiere Pro. You can open a previous project that you have been working on in Blender. So the only way you can navigate out of this, you can just left click anywhere inside the screen, and then when we start, we basically look at Blender in a whole. There are so many things that so many buttons that you can see in Blender, and all of them it's just a scratch on the surface because there are even more buttons, more than what you see right now on the screen. So I'll make sure that I'll take you through the essentials of the software. So this middle part over here is called the 3D viewport, and this is where we're going to be doing most of our 3D work, including rigging and modeling, sculpting, UV editing. We'll discuss what that is, texture painting, weight painting, compositing, rendering. So most of the things will be done on the 3D viewport, and I'll go ahead and show you how we can be able to do that in a few seconds. Okay, so basically everything is divided into areas as we discussed before. So we have areas in areas in Blender. So for example, this is an area, there's also an area over here, this is an area, and these areas contain editors. So this over here is the 3D viewport editor, and you can access the editor button from here. This is the editor button. If I click there, I can see the multiple editors that we can be able to add in this specific area. So as of now, I'm seeing the 3D viewport. What if I wanted to see, for example, the graph editor, something that you're familiar with from the motion graphics class? If I click there, it now switches that area and gives us the editor, the graph editor. So all these editors are very important in 3D, and we're going to be discussing them as we continue. Let me go ahead and show you a few things on the viewport. I'll just switch back to the 3D viewport here, and we have specific things here that we can take a look at. We have the camera here. We have, I'm using my right click to select. We have the cube, and also have the light here. So, and you can also see them from the outline. This is another editor here, so you can be able to even select them from here. You have the cube, the light, and the camera. And then we'll go ahead and show you the header up here. So this is basically the header, and contains options, and we'll look at all this as we continue also in Blender. So there are also some few things. Maybe let me see if I can find access to it. Let me just pull this to the top. This is now the timeline. This is where we'll be animating. So here we'll create keyframes similar to what we were doing in After Effects to be able to animate our objects in 3D. We also have the properties editor, which is this one over here. Has so many properties. For example, if I select this light over here, I can be able to go to the properties of the light, maybe change the type of light, maybe change the color, the power of the light, and also play with the diffuse and specular for the lights. So all these editors play a part in making our 3D scenes in Blender. Let me go ahead and go to navigation in Blender. So apart from what you've seen here, we have so many other panels, and we're going to be going through them. That's similar to the way we had workspaces in Premiere. We also have specific workspaces in Blender, but you can switch them from going to layout, modeling, sculpting. They give you the panels that work with sculpting. Sculpting is basically what you're doing with what do we call it, plasticine. While you are in primary or nursery school, you played around with the plasticine trying to make models out of it. So this is the same thing that works in sculpting. So it will give you brushes and all those nice things that you can play around with to be able to fashion this 3D cube or whatever you add in your scene to be able to look like something else, for example a car or a creature. So we have those different workspaces, and then I'll show you how we'll work with them as we continue on. Let me go back to the layout because I want to show you how to navigate in Blender. That's one of the most important things. So basically navigation in Blender is very simple. You just use the middle mouse button. So if I hold down the middle mouse button down and then start dragging it around, I can be able to orbit around the scene. hopefully you can do that. So middle mouse down and then you orbit. We have, if you wanted to pan, so for example, if you wanted to move, just hold down shift and then you can use the middle mouse button also to pan around. If you wanted to zoom, you can use the scroll wheel to zoom in, or you can hold down control in the keyboard and use the middle mouse button again, hold it down and then just drag your mouse up and down or side by side to try and zoom in and out. Okay, so we have those options. So basically the middle mouse button alone gives you orbit. Shift plus the middle mouse button allows you to pan. Control plus the middle mouse button allows you to zoom in, or you can use the scroll wheel up and down to zoom in and out of the scene. The other thing is the views. We have specific view. As of now we are seeing the user perspective. If I hit on 1, for example, switches me to front orthographic view. So let me just add a model here that we can basically see the front and the back. I'll go ahead and select this cube, hit on X on the keyboard to delete, and then hit on delete button to confirm. Then I'll go ahead and hit on Shift A, go to mesh. Shift A allows us to add models to our scene. So I'll go to mesh here and choose to add the monkey. I'll click on 1 to go to front view. So make sure that your mouse is on top of the 3D viewport before clicking on numpad 1. So the numpad is the buttons that are usually to your right hand side, the ones that are usually to the right hand side of the keyboard. Just click on 1 to go to front orthographic view. Then I can also use the shift middle mouse button to pan around so that I can be able to zoom in with the scroll wheel and then pan it around so that I fit it to the screen. If I hold down the tilde key just under escape, I can be able to also see some of the views. So these are all of them. So we have the views here, but I'll be using the shortcuts, the numpads, which are easier to navigate. If I hit on control numpad 1, I switch to the back orthographic view. If I hit on 7, I go to top view. Control 7 gives me bottom orthographic view. Control 3 gives me side view, right view. Control 3 gives me left view. So those are some of the ways we can navigate in Blender. We also have other buttons here like the 2, 4, and 6, and 8, which can allow you to rotate around the object using those buttons 2, 4, 6, and 8. We also have numpad plus and minus to zoom in and out. You also have numpad, the period key or delete key on the numpad, which usually just scales or zooms into the selected objects. For example, let me just go ahead and break perspective here. Just zoom out, maybe even just take it to the side. If I hit on the period key, it zooms into the specific selected object in the scene. We'll be working with this many times. Sometimes you're in front view, and if you hit on 5 on the keyboard, switches between perspective and orthographic view, which are very important, and we'll show you how they work in Blender. Since orthographic view is basically just a flatter view with no perspective distortion, so you basically can be able to, for example, if you wanted to select this specific underlying vertices, I'll call them vertices for now, or points, we can be able just to switch to orthographic view and select the points and then move them around in a fashion that we know that they are moving on 2 axes only. Hopefully I'll try and explain that when you start modeling. And then you have the perspective view, which has a realistic feel to it, so gives you that perspective distortion that is similar to what we usually see with our eyes. So sometimes you may forget, but it's very simple. So 1 is front view, 3 is side view, and then if you add control 1, control 3 gives you the opposite of 1 and 3, and 7 also is the top view. Control 7 gives you bottom view. 5 switches between perspective and orthographic, and then you had 2, 4, 6, and 8, which were helping you to also rotate around the object or orbit around the object. The other one we didn't study is 0, numpad 0, which just basically switches to the camera view. So what the camera is actually seeing, 3D camera in Blender, which will also be very useful when we start. So the other thing I should mention is that if you forget some of these shortcuts, you can just go to the menu here, click on view, and then look for viewpoint, and then you have all those all those views listed here with the respective numpad shortcuts here. Maybe that's it in navigation. I don't think there's anything that I can show you. Also, let me show you this. We also have the same things that we were doing with the middle mouse button. We can be able to do them from here. If I click on this button over here to zoom in and out, left click and drag, I can be able to zoom in and out. We can also pan from here. So left click on the pan on the hand tool here, and then you can also toggle between camera view with this one over here, or you can just use 0 on the keyboard, numpad 0. And then what else can we do here? We can also click on this to basically change between orthographic and perspective view. I can also choose to orbit. So if I left click on the widget here, the interactive widget, I'll call it that for now. I can also turn using the axis. These are some of the axes. We have X, Y, and Z axis. I can be able to orbit around the object also with the interactive region here. So those are some of the ways we can navigate in Blender. So maybe a few things I can show you also in regards to the user preferences. If I go to edit here, there's a few things that I usually change when I'm working in Blender. So I like to right click in Blender instead of as in if I want to select, I usually select with the right click, and then spacebar gives me the options to search in Blender. That's how I was working with the other versions of Blender before they switched to this new one. If you prefer using the left mouse button to select, you can also switch to left mouse. That's most people are used to in other softwares and also in normal Windows Explorer. Left click works for them, so you can just switch that from here in the key map. The only thing I think I'll switch to is the navigation button here, because there are a few things that we need to turn on that are not turned on originally, and we need to turn them on so that we can work with Blender in a reasonable way. I like to turn on zoom to mouse position, this one over here, just to turn it on. It basically helps us to zoom in and out based on where the cursor is. So let me turn it off, show you. If I start zooming in and out, if for example if I place my mouse on the camera and start zooming in and out, it will basically zoom in to where the origin of the scene is. If I wanted to do this, let me just come back to edit, do preferences again, and zoom to mouse position. Then I'll just close this one here. If I place my mouse on the camera and zoom, it basically zooms into that specific position. That's what I want it to do. Okay, the other thing I may basically change is also the auto depth, which is here, auto depth. This one helps me to rotate also rotating the scene, but guided with the mouse cursor again. So let me just, as of now, if I start orbiting, it orbits, assuming I was wanted to orbiting on this camera, it still orbits around the origin of the scene. If I want to orbit or maybe on the camera, what I need to do is just turn that on. So auto depth, close this, place my mouse on the camera or the cursor on the camera, and basically orbits around that specific object. Gives me much control on when I'm doing that. So maybe some few shortcuts that I can introduce to you before we start. Yes, I can basically select this model. I've right clicked there, Shift D duplicates, and I can place this model here. Shift D duplicates. We'll continue looking at some of the shortcuts to next week, so don't worry about it. But Shift D duplicates, and we can basically now use the specific auto depth control that we have turned on in the preferences to be able to pan around the second model instead of panning around the origin of the scene. Okay, so I'm almost done. Just going through some of the few things here. You also notice that when you click on numpad 1 and numpad 3, there's some kind of animation that goes on, and sometimes it becomes nerve-wracking when you're working on a huge scene and you want to move very fast. So you can also change that from the preferences. The smooth view, if I convert it to 0 and hit on 1, 3, just changes automatically without that smooth out animation. That's not a bother for me, so we can just take it back unless otherwise we can use that. The interactive navigation, at least you have covered that. Also, before that, let me just go back to edit preferences, confirm that all the changes that I've made have been saved out. You can click on this flyout menu here, and you can just make sure that the autosave preferences checkmark is on, so that it saves everything that you have been doing. All those changes that we have made on the navigation have all will reflect on all the models, in all the projects that we use in Blender. Okay, apart from that, I'd like to show you how to save a project. So you can just go to File, very simple, Save As, and then you can find a location on your computer to save all your projects. You can also go to File and Open Project here. You can also create a new project from scratch using the specific project specifications there that you have. So Blender does also video editing, so don't be surprised. Also does VFX, sculpting, and 2D animation with the grease pencils that was introduced recently. We also have N and T, button N and T, to show more controls for the toolbar. N and T on the keyboard shows those toolbars there. The other thing that I have not mentioned maybe is you can also choose to, maybe let me see, as of now, if I left click anywhere, I'm able to move the cursor, the 3D cursor. Yours might be different depending on what you chose to use as your selection. I'm using right click as my selection. If I hit on Shift C on the keyboard, takes my 3D cursor to the center or the origin of the scene, which is world 0 here, the center, where Y and X meet. Saying Y because Y is represented with green, you can see it from here, and X with red, which is here, so they meet at world 0, and also Z meet at world 0 where they intersect. So if you wanted to maybe move this model around, we can hit on G on the keyboard to move. G helps us to move. We'll also look at that. If I hit on G and then move it and then right click, it cancels out the transformation. If I hit on G and then left click, it now registers the transformation that I've made to the object or to the mesh. If I want to select multiple objects, I just shift down and then right click so that I can select all the objects in the scene. I can also right click on an empty space to deselect. I can hit on A on the keyboard to select all the objects in the scene, or Alt A to deselect all the objects in the scene. Also A deselect, and you can also right click on an empty space to deselect objects in your scene. Last thing maybe is the box select. As of now, if I hit on T, you can be able to see that. If I click on him, I can see as of now we have tweak, we have select box, select circle, and lasso select. All this we're going to be looking at them. Let's look at select box, which is very simple. Just marquee drag to select everything in your scene. You can also hit on shift, let me just select these two down here, shift to add to the selection, control to box select, and to subtract from the selection in Blender. So that's what I have for you today. You can just go ahead, experiment, see if you can add more models. So Shift A, add more meshes to your scene, see if you can be able to play around with some of the what you have learned, the navigation tools and some of the basic tools that we have there, and we'll meet in the next class.